back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and today I'm excited as we're doing a top 10 video here on the channel. You're probably wondering, where the heck did this come from, and why are you doing this? Well, good question. Basically, through two different major avenues on the channel, not just YouTube, but the Rolling Solo Facebook community, which is growing every single day, almost cresting up to 7,000 individuals currently, and the Discord channel, which is active every day, all day, people chattering in there about crowdfunding projects and games that they're playing solo. There have been a number of people across these different social media platforms that have messaged me over the past, I want to say 6 months, and said, are you going to do more top 10 lists, top X lists of whatever value? We'd love to see more of that. And I kind of went, yeah, okay, cool. And I kind of just said, like, I'll get to it. Like, I'm kind of transitioning here. I moved mid last year and I'm still just trying to get into my groove again. And I found my stride in my regular content gameplay wise easily. But in terms of additional content, I haven't gotten there yet. But now I kind of have. Now I'm in a space where I'm kind of going, I really do want to start plugging in these kind of list videos a little more often. And I thought, hey, what the heck? Let's go ahead and pick one of the topics that were submitted to me. And one of them was, why don't you do something per publisher or per board game mechanism or whatever theme. Typically I do theme on the channel, and typically I do obviously like kind of a year-end wrap-up top X list. So I'll do like best solo games of the year, or have the Rolling Solo board game community vote and decide themselves, and have those kind of videos. But these little ones that happen throughout the year, I don't typically do that, but I really wanted to kind of start doing it again because I love making list videos. I mean, they actually are pretty fun, and they give you a really good idea as to what games I'm into and which ones you should definitely potentially avoid. And I don't want to necessarily say that all my top X videos are going to have games you should avoid, but this one might. There's a few, and this is where it gets interesting, because when you're doing these smaller lists that are more targeted at a specific publisher, or they're more targeted at a specific board game mechanism or whatever it is, you might kind of be pushed into a box. There might only be so many solo games to choose. And so to make a list of 5, or if you're doing a list of 5, it's probably doable, but a list of 10 can be tough. And with CMON, see, I tried to say Cool Money or not. CMON Games, with CMON Games, I was able to fill this list of 10, but I had some exclusions in there as well. So I want to talk about those before we dig into this a little further. So the first couple exclusions, and these are more disclaimers around this list, is the first one is Arcadia Quest is not part of this list. And that's because, well, it never was from the very beginning a solo playable game whatsoever. It was multiplayer based, but there was a solo mode that came out many, many, many years down the line. And there was a lot of community work around playtesting it and everything else. I'm not saying it's not a viable option for the list, but I'm not including it because it wasn't part of the original experience, and people didn't purchase the game because of it, and it didn't get its review ratings or anything else because of it. So it kind of came so late in the game that it's like, hey, this is available, it's out there, but it's not going to be part of my list. The other one is a game that I just don't think for any reason whatsoever you could even call this thing a solo playable game, but it is. And that is Project Elite. You can technically play Project Elite solo. And I'm sure there's some people that say, hey, I'm able to do it, it's not a big deal. But I will tell you this, I had the hardest time having any kind of joy inside of me playing that game solo. Like, you need to be playing that with other people in a co-op fashion to get the joy of the game. And the game is really fun with other people, but man, when you're playing by yourself solo, you are going to play that a handful of times and go like, yikes, if that was the reason you purchased the game, not a good idea. So those are the two ones that are not part of this list at all, because I don't really consider them to be solo playable. The rest are. So we're going to start from the very bottom of the list, and we're going to work our way up. And as we go through, I'm going to try my best to remember to tell you guys the ones that are on the list in this case that I actually don't recommend. And some of them are going to be probably fairly obvious. They'll be on the lower portion of the list. And then things will get much better towards the top. And you also get to see kind of the order I've put them in the first place. And this might help you if you're looking at a particular publisher, in this case, CMON Games, trying to figure out what solo playable games might be of interest to you. So without further ado, let's begin with number 10. Number 10 on the list is God of War, the card game. This again pulling heavily from the IP of God of War, which I did play the video game. So I do have a lot of experience with this one and did understand obviously the premise behind it, the storyline, all that good stuff. That certainly kind of draws you in a little bit more if you understand that, rather than coming in cold, but you still kind of have to like the game. This is a perfect example of where maybe an IP was used and it might have been not exactly implemented the greatest in terms of the gameplay. It didn't really land for me, to be honest. And I know this is a top 10 list, but again, because I have to fill out 10 games that are solo playable, you're not going to see the best stuff at the very bottom of the list per se. This is one I wouldn't recommend that you go check out. It's been out for a number of years, but I believe it's been more so discounted and it's still around, but it's not something I would chase down. It's definitely on the mid-weight to probably lighter side of the equation. And you'll see here that there's not a ton of voting around what is the best way to play, but solo seems to be quite a bit up there. So there's that. The one thing I will show you is just a picture of what it looks like on the table. Again, it's obviously grabbing the artwork from the video game and using that a lot. But you have these mosaics basically going on. You're accomplishing the game through leveling. And once you go through those mosaics and you'll be flipping cards over, it'll change the look of the scene. That is kind of a cool aspect for some reason for me. I like that when it's used in a game like Tainted Grail, where like the landscape changes on a world map, more so than I probably like it in this, where it's kind of trying to mimic maybe the excitement of what would be in the video game. Like this is one of those implementations where I would sit there and go, I think I would probably just rather play the video game than play this, because I didn't find the game design to be inspired, to have heart that would make me want to play this over the video game. And so for that reason, this game entered my collection and then it swiftly left my collection, as you can see here. Number 9 on the list is Xenoshift Dreadmire, and it was worth mentioning there with God of War, the card game. There is some deck building and deck management going on there to a mild degree. Here we have another one that actually has classic deck building built inside of it, and you're going to basically be kind of bolstering up your deck of troops and kind of getting it ready to defend against the hordes that are coming against you. And I guess the one thing that makes this one unique is the fact that there's not a ton of sci-fi specific deck builders. Now, there's obviously the Alien deck building game, which is extremely highly regarded in the solo community. So that one I would say is the one you should definitely go after, more so than this one. But this is another one that kind of sneaked under the bottom of the list that I had. And as you can see right here, it left my collection. It just didn't hit the mark for me. I'll show you a couple, clips of the different items and different cards you can see within the game, just giving ideas to what it looks like here on the table. And it's not to say that it's not good. It's not to say that I didn't enjoy my time with it. It just didn't stick with me long term. It was kind of one of those things where I ripped through a good chunk of the game and then I just kind of didn't really feel the passion to continue through it. Now, some people will say that they really got into it. And again, you can't find a ton of these sci-fi deck builder games, especially ones that are kind of in this type of a theme. So that can kind of creep it a little higher up on people's lists. But for me, it just didn't hit the mark as much. So this one remains in the 9th position. I would say that this is kind of a wary recommendation. I wouldn't say that it's like a high recommendation, but it's one that I, again, had to kind of get stuff into the list to get us to the 10 that we need here for CMON Games. Now, in the 8th spot of this list, this is where I start saying, yeah, you should start looking into some of these games because they might be a really good fit for you. Masmorra Dungeons of Arcadia. Man, does this bring me back. This brings me back to the time frame when the channel first started. That's pretty insane. This was actually my very first game unboxing. It was actually my first video that I ever published. Was receiving this because I knew my Uncle Rod from Watch It Played had Luke as a promo card in this campaign. And I remember when it showed up, it was a huge deal. And I thought it was so cool that my uncle had his son as a promo card inside of it. And I was already excited for the game in general, but this one definitely, had something special going for it. It was very kind of, adorable, I guess, in terms of how it was laid out. And it was also relatively quick to play. It's a dungeon crawler using dice. You're rolling them. That determines kind of what enemies are actually on the game board. And you're going to take those enemies down. And of course, there was a lot of what you'd see from Zombicide, where there's kind of mockery of characters from movies like Legolas, for instance, and here's Greensleeves and stuff like that. You see that throughout it. And of course, there was lots of crossovers between Arcade Quest and Mass Mora as well. But the gameplay of this one was actually a lot of fun in the solo capacity, because there was a deck, if memory serves correctly, that would control things for you. So you could actually get some good play to this one. But the funny thing is, overall from the people, it's not highly recommended. It was actually more so recommended as a multiplayer game. So even though I enjoyed it, I think my opinion, or maybe my own personal bias, affected my brain a little bit back then, and I thought it was much better than it was. Probably again because it had ties to people I knew, and I was just excited for how kind of cool it looked on the table, and it did have a kind of a unique look. I still have this one in my collection, but I actually have been thinking lately that I probably should sell it. It's been sitting for a very long time. I think the only reason that I haven't gotten rid of it yet is because I think it could be a really cool one to introduce to my daughter as a introduction to dungeon crawling, and I could probably tweak the rules in a way to kind of help her learn, a game that kind of has this stuff going on in it. And it's not something I've really opened the door on yet with her, but this is probably a pretty good example of a game that could certainly, fit that bill. So not bad. Brings back good memories. But this one, yep, it's in my collection. It'll probably stay simply because I'm going to show my younger daughter. But I would say that if you are probably in the vicinity age range of 18 and above, you'll probably get through this one, play it a handful of times and probably pass it on. The 7th game on the list is Trudvang Legends. This one, man, did it ever have a rocky road when it was going through crowdfunding in terms of development, but it did land, and it actually lands in a decent overall rating from the community. 7.1 isn't bad. I'd say anything 7 and above is certainly worth looking into. And Trudvang Legends, of course, built upon the Trudvang Chronicles Swedish RPG, as it mentions here. So it's really trying to kind of adapt that RPG to a tabletop experience, and that's really what it aims to do. It has some really cool things inside of it that I do like. And this is a game I have in my collection, don't plan on getting rid of anytime soon. But basically, you can slide cards into these different areas on the board, and that's going to allow you to basically have the game state change over time. So things that you do within the game, whether it's through stories, you're taking your turns, you're moving through your quests, you're going to have, the world itself mold based on your decisions, the outcomes and everything else. And it's going to be all on the board as a game state. So when you're done with it, you're going to fold it up, throw it in the box, and come back to it later, open it up, boom, you're right back to where you were. That's one element to this one that I thought was really cool in terms of design, was when they mentioned that they were making those pockets on the board. And of course, when the board actually folds, it won't destroy any of the pockets. But I thought that was a really cool thing to do. And the reason I gravitated towards it is because typically that fantasy storytelling adventure board game is part of my wheelhouse. It's an area I enjoy, but I don't have tons of history in terms of the RPG, so I wasn't gravitating towards it for any more than just that it had a unique selling feature of a few different aspects that I had seen during the crowdfunding campaign, and I've played it and I do enjoy it. And it's actually one I'd like to get to the channel just to kind of show you guys a little bit more for those of you that are interested. So this is one I would, at this point, like I was saying before with Mass Mora and above, I would say now we're into the area here where I'd actually put some recommendations behind some of these games. And there are going to be a bunch of people that are going to turn around and say Trudvang is garbage and I got rid of it immediately and I was super unimpressed and blah, blah, blah. That's fine, because that's going to happen across any number of games depending on a number of factors. But I would say that, don't throw a game out because of tough development timeframes or whatever else. And I know that they had to absolutely on this one do some serious pivots on that development, which can throw into question, is this the game that everyone signed up for originally, or was it very much pivoted off the train tracks? And it's probably a bit of both. It is kind of a bit of both. So long story short, I think it's cool. I think it's interesting. It's unique. And I think there is value in checking it out. But I think it's a solid spot on the list. And it's one of those ones that if I maybe spend even a little bit more time with it, it might rise higher. In the 6th position on the list here, we have a new one. This is Masters of the Universe, the board game, and new in terms of it recently delivering. And this recently delivered for me about a month and a half ago or so. And this is what I was actually really looking forward to. Now, the interesting thing about this for me is that I don't have a huge tie to Masters of the Universe overall. I simply got this one because it looked interesting to me. There's a ton of people that bought this specifically for the IP because they watched every single episode of the show way back. They know this stuff inside and out. I have a very high level understanding of the universe for Masters of the Universe, which is kind of ironic. But that still doesn't stop me from necessarily checking out a game just because I don't have a huge connection to an IP per se. Now, there are some things around the solo mode here that are worth mentioning, even though this one's in the 6th position on the list. I will say this. There is an FAQ coming out from CMON Games in the near future that is going to hopefully answer a number of things around the AI in the game, and that's an important piece for solo players because the solo players are playing against the AI of the game, and not everything in the rulebook is 100% clear around that. Plus, there are some there are some some terminology and some things on the cards themselves that are not exactly printed perfectly. So that caused issues as well. So when you tie those two things together, the rule book and some cards having some issues in terms of how they're worded and things like that, I don't think it made the solo players feel all that confident that it was well reviewed maybe, or well checked, well balanced maybe. So there's some concern around that, and that's valid concern for sure. So I'm trying. This one sits at the 6th position and really does kind of sit on the edge of the knife. It could fall further up the list and go up, depending on how well the FAQ kind of clears up some of the mud, or it could go the other way around and start dropping drastically to a point where I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to keep this. So it sits in that position, and that's actually one of the reasons why I haven't actually put this one to the channel yet in terms of gameplay, is because I really want to make sure that whatever these kind of gaps in understanding the AI of the game and stuff like this are kind of cleared up in the FAQ before I even bother to think about placing this thing on the channel and the gameplay. But in terms of a production, the thing is really cool. Like, it's very, very cool. And I ended up picking up everything for the game. You got all the terrain and everything else. Like, I'll show you some of the stuff for this. It's pretty nice looking on the table. Like, it definitely has a table presence with all the different elevated terrain going on. There's a huge tower. Like, this thing is just ridiculously cool looking. And I've seen some people like painting this thing up. But yeah, like if you're a fan of Masters of the Universe, like this is gonna bring back, for a number of people, a lot of great childhood memories. And I think that's what this is driving towards. So I hope they're able to kind of nip those things that people are raising the red flag on. But overall, so far, the reception seems to be pretty positive. So I got high hopes for this one. At the number 5 position, we've got Zombicide. And honestly, this one could be broken apart into different pieces depending on which Zombicide edition you're talking about. But I put them all at 5 because, to be completely honest, I've played a majority, if not every single one of them. And they've all got different aspects that I like, and they've got some aspects that I don't like. And of course, the earlier iterations of Zombicide had a lot of rules things that I just thought were silly, but got exponentially better by the time they hit Black Plague and above. Things started to really change for the better around the rules. Some of the things that just drove me nuts. Undead or Alive is the most recent one that I covered on the channel. Night of the Living Dead was one that was really, I love the idea of being kind of stuck in the home and trying to board up the windows, because it just feels kind of like closed in or whatever. But there were some rule gaps there and things like that, and some scenarios that are a little bit wonky in terms of their ease of being able to defeat. But all of these, like whether you're going after Black Plague, because again, this was one of the big turning points in the whole series in terms of like what it did for the fun factor and the tenseness of the amount of zombies kind of crushing down on you. But second edition was another one that kind of came out and added like a whole other level of rule changes from the original edition. Like, it doesn't matter which one you pick. These are all fantastic entries into solo play in general. And Zombicide, as I mentioned multiple times before, was one of my 3 major games that sucked me into solo gaming. I had Mage Knight, Lord of the Rings, the Living Card Game, and Zombicide. Between those 3, you have one that's heavy strategy in Mage Knight. You have Lord of the Rings that also is heavy strategy and deck building. And then Zombicide's kind of like that, like, I need a break from the brain burning aspects of those other 2 games trying to win, and go for something that's just difficult in a different way, has a little bit of chance in there, but also is on more of the fun factor side of the equation. That's what Zombicide filled, was that fun factor. Now there's obviously the Marvel edition of Zombicide that's coming out soon, but like it's ridiculous. Like there are so many implementations of this game now. Now, what actually could happen here is if you guys were interested and you wanted to see me, actually rate all the Zombicides out, there's probably enough of them now that I actually could do a full top 10 list of that. So let me know in the comments below if you think that's of interest. But there might be some of you saying, I've seen enough Zombicide to make me sick and I never even want to talk about it again. Either way, both those camps exist. Fair enough. But I will say that this is one that is, it's one of CMON Games' best series. I mean, and that's why they continue to pump out so many of them, because it can just thematically change up where the game's taking place and just run with the next version of the game in a different location, and people will come running. And it's true. It's a formula that they've used over and over and over again, beating it into the ground. I will say though that the Western one, like I really enjoyed that one. Like I had a lot of fun playing that on the channel, and I think that if I was to, probably come back to one and play on the channel again, it would probably be this one. Although Zombicide Invader was also, the space one was also a lot of fun too. But these Zombicide games are great, so definitely a recommendation on that if you have not checked out any in the past. All right, so time for number 4, and that is Marvel United. Now, this one has creeped up the list over time. Now, when the first Marvel United landed from the Kickstarter, I thought, hey, this is like a super lightweight game, as you can clearly see here on Board Game Geek. This game is not meant to overwhelm the senses in terms of understanding the rulebook or the gameplay complexity, all that kind of stuff. But something changed as I spent more time playing this one. And that was the further that they added to this content. I mean, there was a ton of content in that first Marvel United, and it was simplistic at the beginning and seemed easy to win in certain situations, stuff like that. But then things started to ramp up. The difficulty started to increase. And when X-Men, the Marvel United X-Men landed, things changed. There was a significant shift in the strategy and everything else. And it wasn't like massive, but it was a noticeable jump in terms of what was going on gameplay wise. And I noticed it. And you can even see here that other people noticed it as well. It went from 7.6 to 8.2. So it went from, very good territory to great territory from one iteration to the next. So they learned a bunch from that one, and it jumped up. And I definitely agree that it falls more into the family category than anything else. But the Marvel one kind of just added additional layers to the equation that just kind of increase the tenseness of the situation, making what seems like pretty light, airy gameplay kind of actually start to matter. A lot of the choices you were making and setting up combinations in the right way and thinking ahead and thinking multiple turns ahead to try to figure out how the heck you were going to deal with all these different issues and mitigate things. And then what's even crazier is they, as CMON typically does, they continue to add to this pile. So now there's the Marvel United Multiverse, and I believe this has kind of I believe it's a late pledge open as of right now. So you can pick up even more content, and I've got a funny feeling that this one here is going to go even higher in its rankings than the original two, because I think that they just continue. It's very much like Zombicide. It's kind of like they put out an iteration. It's successful. I think the original Zombicide is probably rated like 7.1 or 7.2. I have to look again. It's not overly high. It was like just enough to be kind of a good game. And then they just continue to adapt it with different theming and everything else. And they keep tweaking things as they go until they turn it into a great game. So it's kind of crazy that way in some of these series of games that CMON has released. But these are ones that sit in my collection. Obviously not the one that is currently still late pledging, but I have the X-Men. I have the entire line of everything from that campaign. I have everything from the original. I recommend these ones, and I think these are going to be huge when my kids get a little bit older to enjoy, because I'll be able to easily teach them. They're also really fun to throw it with friends too, but solo playable, like in terms of the solo crowd, this is a great solo game as well. So you'll take a look here and you can see the large majority of people, a good chunk of them, are saying that it's a good idea for solo play. So I come over here and take a look at the one here for X-Men. There's not as many votes, but still in terms of a ratio, very good. So this is definitely one I recommend. And it kind of fluctuated on this list. I actually had it in a higher spot and I dropped it down a peg, and I actually had a lower spot at one point because I revised this list a couple times. And I think where it sits right now, I'm comfortable with it at 4. Now we enter top 3 territory, and one of the games that was bouncing around there with Marvel United was Massive Darkness 2 Hellscape. Now, Massive Darkness, the original, was not even on this list whatsoever, and I wouldn't have put it on this list because I didn't think... I remember playing that on the channel, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that introduction scenario, but shortly after playing that, I realized that the, again, heart of the game was so shallow in that first iteration of Massive Darkness, and it was like you had to imagine the game was bigger than it was for you to kind of be sold on it. And I think that's what sold a lot of people the first time around, was that it was going to be this crazy dungeon crawler. It was just going to be a lot of fun, light on the rules, that kind of thing. It didn't really hit the mark, and it kind of had a lot of annoying fiddliness going on in there with a lot of the symbols on the dice was driving everybody nuts. And it was pinging off all the different cards with the different abilities, and you have to keep track of a bunch of little silly things that were just kind of, they needed to streamline all that stuff, and they did. So Massive Darkness 2 came out, and when I played the prototype, I remember covering it on Tabletop Simulator. I was like, this is the way the first one should have come out. There should have been classes for each of the different heroes. Those classes made a huge deal in terms of making each character feel unique. It also gave kind of the excitement of just beyond planning your typical actions for a certain scenario, but it also gave you the ability to be like, oh, I can do X different than everybody else, so I can provide a benefit in this way that the party, holistically can benefit from. Also, just everything about the game got that much more unique and interesting with the second iteration. And this is the reason why I struggled with this one being in the third position, because I thought Marvel United might be in third. But then I was like, no, you know what? They did such a good job listening to the community on how they originally, again, this is very similar to what they did with Marvel United and Zombicide, where they, put a game out, and over time, based on community feedback and just people kind of going like, these key things here, not that great. And the iterations came out and they just kind of squashed all that issue. They did the same thing with Massive Darkness. They came through and they basically said, and then on top of it, during the campaign, they were able to also offer people that had the old material a way to kind of bring it forward. So you could actually kind of combine all of it into one truly massive amount of content. And that was really cool too. So it really showed that they were out there to try to support the players that had bought the original and bring them to current day with better rule sets. They did a really good job, and some of the stuff is just off the charts. Some people have made some insane things, but I like this game, and I covered this game I covered this one in a showcase on the channel, gameplay wise, and I had an absolute blast. This is one I would love to play again on the channel because it's just fun, and that's the way the first one should have been. The number 2 spot absolutely belongs to Bloodborne, the board game. This is a game which is rated as being the best as a solo playable game or a 2-player game, and I definitely recommend this as a solo playable game. This is phenomenal. I'm actually kind of surprised it's not even in the 8 category. This should easily be around 8.5 as a rating without any question whatsoever. Like the card-driven battle kind of combat that's going on here is just awesome. It's unique, and it's perfect for the translation of a video game IP to the tabletop. In terms of me understanding the video game itself, I know exactly how that operates. And so when I saw this implementation gameplay wise, and I saw them talking about it, I had hopes that this would be good, but I had no idea it was going to be as good as it was. It has tons of table presence. The enemies that come out are varied. Like, they have very different styles of attack that you have to learn to strategize around. There are some quirks around things within the gameplay that I can see why some people may not like it. But I can tell you right now, like, I had a blast playing this. This is never going to leave my collection. Like, I am not selling this thing. You'll have to take it out of my dead hands. It is not leaving. It is too good. I like it too much. And it's definitely one that I like to put back on the channel for another showcase in the future, because I had so much fun showing you guys this one when it first landed. The only thing that could make it better is painted, honestly. And last but certainly not least, the one that you guys, I'm sure, could call a mile away was Cthulhu Death May Die, sitting at number 1. Yes, indeed. This was my 2019 surprise of the year. And you might be going, well, why was it a surprise? It doesn't seem like a game that would be a surprise. At the time, there was so much heat for this game. When it landed, there was people getting mad because they had the Cthulhu miniature that was massive and it was very expensive and it was hard to even get because they were only making so many of them. And there's a lot of people that were saying that they were going to basically boycott the entire game because there was no way in heck they were going to bother if there's a giant miniature they can't get. And there was all this drama around it. And, there was still the unknown of whether or not the game was actually going to be any good. It was quite an interesting pairing together with Eric and Rob together, but there's some firepower between the two of them in terms of design. And of course, when you say H.P. Lovecraft, people start getting really excited, including cats. And they just did a phenomenal job of... It's insane when you think about it, because Eldritch Horror and Arkham Horror and all those games, like Fantasy Flight has or had and still has a stranglehold on the H.P. Lovecraft IP in terms of the board game industry. Like they have probably the most amount of games based in that lore that are in top tier level numbers in terms of reviews and things like that, or just people's lists. And so for CMON Games to be able to break through that barrier of expectation around Fantasy Flight and what they put out for Eldritch Horror and Arkham Horror and all those kind of games and the LCG and everything else, and come out with their own completely unique way of showing you a very different aspect of the feeling of going through an H.P. Lovecraft experience, where you're in this situation where it's down to the very end. You're not an investigator kind of going like blundering around going like, oh, something weird's happening. A portal's over here. That's odd. Let's go investigate. Like, it's not like there's tons of time to think about it. It's like the time is now. Things have gone downhill real quick. Cultists are all over the place. Bad things are happening. And the Elder God is basically breaking through the veil, showing up in reality, and is tearing everybody apart. Like it is the end game of the entire Marvel series. You're just jumping right to the very end. And so because of that, the excitement level of the game itself and the tension level is off the charts, because you immediately are like, we have to win or we just die trying. And that's literally what happens. You are balancing your sanity. You're balancing your ability to become more powerful. You can't go too crazy, but you're trying to go crazy to become powerful. And it's this wonderful balance of like, how far do I push myself to get to a point where I'm strong enough to take this thing down? I have gushed on this thing like crazy. I've covered the original. I covered even the most recent crowdfunding campaign, showing you guys some coverage of this game, or I should say not this one particularly, but the new content that's coming for the game, which I really think is going to be a nice addition that's not required to add certain pieces in, but you can, and they add some really thematic elements to the gameplay that I think just even spice it up further and allow for some different monsters to show up, and also for some relics to kind of... Oh, it's so cool. The relics just kind of change based on how crazy you're going. You might look at it and be like, this is a regular book. It's no big deal. And all of a sudden you get to a certain point on the threshold track where you're going crazy and you go, that book, that book is really bad. Like that book isn't what I thought it was originally. And you flip the card over and the whole ability changes into something completely different. And having these different things just kind of as a plug and play. And that's really what this game was made. It feels like it's kind of made like a jigsaw puzzle. Like it's like you take the Elder God box and you jam it in with the scenario box, you jam that in, you put those together, and boom, you've got yourself a game. But then you can unplug the Elder God, chuck it away, put another Elder God into the same scenario and have something completely different occur. And that's kind of what's really cool about this game, is its ability to be modular and change. And you can just pick up 2 different combinations and put them together and it just works. And that's insane. Like to be able to build a balanced game around that, that's impressive. Yeah, I could gush on this one forever. This is one again that will not leave my collection. Cthulhu sits way up there on the very, very top of my shelf. I have the whole first line, first season, second season that was released, and I'm looking forward to the third coming. I will play this thing into the ground and continue to do so to this day. I show a ton of people, and it deserves every bloody success that it possibly comes across. And there's no reason whatsoever for them to revise any rules in this. I mean, they release FAQs as they normally do for most of these games just to squash some of the questions, but like this game couldn't have come out the door more perfect. And I was really happy to see them bring back season 3 when they did, because they were leaving money on the table. Like this, there were people that were chomping at the bit for this thing after it came out, realizing that, oh no, this isn't just like a shot in the dark to, use the H.P. Lovecraft theme and hope for good things. Like they created something different and unique, and it stands completely alone from Eldritch Horror and Arkham Horror and the LCG and the board game and all that stuff. It's its own thing, and man, did they ever nail it. So I will stop gushing on that one, but you can tell those, when you get up into the top 4 of this list, you're talking quality stuff. Like, you're in terms of like the stuff that I like the most from CMON Games so far. And I'm sure down the pipes, there's going to be some other ones that are going to come out that'll be of interest and stuff like that. One other one I'm looking forward to this year, seeing how the solo worked out for, and I have no idea whether it'll be good or not. We'll find out, is the Dune one. I'm kind of curious as to whether or not that's going to be any good. It looks like it would be better multiplayer, but it has the ability to be played solo. So I've got my eyes on that one too, going like maybe this will be another one like Masters of the Universe that could surprise me potentially. And I have a little bit more of a connection with the Dune IP than I do with Masters of the Universe. But regardless, CMON Games typically has some good IPs up their sleeves, and for the most part, the production values are really good. Shipping can be kind of a kick in the pants, as we all know, but at the end of the day, if they were no longer a publisher in the board game space, I'd probably be pretty upset, because I actually do enjoy quite a bit of the stuff that they put out for the most part. There have been a handful of duds over the years too, but for the most part, on the whole of the equation of everything that they've ever put out, I would say they're not bad at all. So long story short, that's going to wrap up this list. I had a lot of fun doing this. Like I said, like, this is the kind of stuff I'd like to do. I mean, maybe next we can do another big publisher. It's easier to do 10 games from a publisher that's been around a little longer, because they have a bigger library of games to choose from. So maybe Fantasy Flight Games won't be a bad one to do next, seeing as they have well more than enough games. But let me know in the comments below, like, would you like me to do another publisher next, or would you rather me do something that's more, you want me to pick a topic, like a theme, or something like this, or maybe a mechanism within the board game space that you want me to do a top 10 list on. But anyway, let me know in the comments below. That'll help me, because the more ideas that I get in, the more I'll just kind of pick from those ideas. And that will certainly help to form my next one. But thank you guys so much for watching. It is bloody late. It's 11. Actually, it's really not that late, but I am exhausted. I had a full day with my family, which was a lot of fun. But I had my kids there as well. It's 11:38 right now, and I have no idea how I even stayed awake long enough to do this, because I feel like passing out. But I was excited to put a list together. So I did it 2-3 weeks ago, and I was like, I looked at my phone when I was at Easter with my dinner with my family, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got a list written out here on my phone. I should revise this and tweak it and kind of pare it down and then film it today when I get home. And here we are. So what happened? I did it. I'm on the train, which means if I've done one, maybe I'll do another one, and we won't have to wait so long next time. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, keep on rolling solo.